All right, stop me if you've heard this one before. Canada Post workers are on strike again. Now, they feel like they've been forced into this position after the federal government says major changes are needed at the Crown Corporation, notably ending door-to-door deliveries. So far, the feds don't look like they will intervene. As Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu said, she's encouraging both parties to continue to work towards a resolution in their ongoing labor dispute. Now, over the past year, the federal government has used back-to-work legislation to end other disputes, like strikes by the rail workers and Air Canada flight attendants. So how could this latest walkout impact the federal government's politically? Let's bring in the front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's a senior advisor at North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is the former communications director to Erin O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. Former interim NDP national director Carl Belanger is here. He is now the president of Traction Strategies. And back in her usual spot is CTV national news correspondent Rachel Aiello. Welcome back to Friday, everyone. Great to have you all back here. Now, Sabrina, during the campaign, Mark Carney said that the Liberals support workers' rights. And after what I just listed off, can they still say that?
Well, I think not all strikes are made equal, and I think that that's where you're seeing the government kind of maybe be a little bit more ambivalent about this strike when it comes to Canada Post workers. I mean, I will say I think some of the moves they made earlier when it comes to Air Canada were in error, but where Canadians stand when it comes to Canada Post is not super far from where it seems like the government and Canada Post itself stands when you don't think about the workers. And I think what's most important is, like, we've seen some of these headlines like sweeping changes, like no more door-to-door delivery. How many people are checking their mail every day for bills or for important documents? So many people have switched online. I think Canada Post needs to reevaluate this question. They need to determine if their urban service is the right one or just rural. And I think that the government is maybe on the right track with letting Canada Post figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm checking every day for bills. I think I may be peering into the slot, hoping that there aren't bills every day, Sabrina, but fair. Melanie, I noticed online a number of Conservatives giving flowers to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper because he was going to move to end door-to-door deliveries. So do you feel like this kind of puts Mark Carney in the same category as Harper now because he's making this big change?
Yeah, and well, he should make this change, frankly. Like, I know that people who enjoy getting door-to-door mail delivery, it's definitely a perk. I personally have a community mailbox. I don't have a problem with it. But look, at the end of the day, what's happening here is the public has completely lost trust in Canada Post over the strike last year, and now this one happening again. Small businesses are turning away from working with Canada Post. I'm a small business owner, and I can no longer rely on clients sending checks by mail. So we've moved our entire system over to electronic fund transfers. And I know that many other thousands of other businesses across the country have done the same thing. And the problem for Canada Post is once you do that, no one goes back. And so it's kind of a downward death spiral that they're in. The more trust they lose from businesses in Canada, the worse the situation gets for them financially. So it is absolutely time for the government to step in and make some changes.
Rachel, where does this put Mark Carney, though? Because he has said in the past, or a lot of people have said about him, he's going to run government like a business. Is this him just going in that way now?
It does appear that way. What I'm really going to be watching for in this instance, Mike, is how long the strike goes on before the pressure is mounting on the federal government to intervene. I think similar to the argument used in the Air Canada situation, they are able to say, we are still in a crisis mode. A lot of these small businesses, as Mel rightly points out, are being impacted by tariffs right now, and now they are facing potentially additional costs of having to go to private shippers. So it's kind of one thing after the other. So I do think the Prime Minister will have some cover if they do decide to intervene. But it did really strike me when the announcement was made yesterday. I remember when there was all that controversy around the community mailboxes about a decade ago. And it really just seems like this Prime Minister is one who is business-oriented, delivering-oriented, understanding what makes dollars and cents. And for the 4 million Canadians, I am one of them who still have door-to-door delivery, shifting to that new model is going to be gradual. So we'll see how long it takes, what that costs. But I think Interestingly as well, they're going to be using Canadian steel to make these new community mailboxes, which I thought was an interesting way
There's
to
their
sell
out.
things.
That's great.
There's the route. That's it. We got it. It's done, everybody. Don't worry about it. We're making Canadian steel. We're making it with Canadian steel, so it's going to be okay. Sorry, Carl. I can't help but think when I introduce this about the Liberals saying that they are the party of workers. And there is that fight for this, right? The Conservatives saying they're the party of workers. What does this do for the NDP? Does this give them a bit of an opening as they're getting ready for their leadership race when you consider that, the Stephen Harper government was going to go ahead with this? It became an election issue back in 2015. Now we're seeing the Liberals do it. Can they bring back that flag into the fold?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, how do you make sure that every time this Liberal government brings workers back to work against their will, that they pay the political price? And so you have that balance between, the right of workers and then the need of customers and businesses and everybody else that's affected and impacted by those strikes. When the Air Canada agents went on strike, there was a lot of stranded customers and everybody knew someone who had a bad story. Yeah. So you have to play, this against that. But if you are going after the unionized vote, you're opening you're opening a door for the NDP to come back and get back those people that used to vote NDP, and in some cases have turned to the Liberals, some other cases have turned to Conservatives. But at the end of the day, it's all about what will the government do with Canada Post, because frankly, you cut services, well, people stop using those services. That's what happened when you use community mailbox. And then they tried. Remember e-Post? Did you have a Canada e-Post account back in the late 90s, early 2000s? It lasted for about 20 years. You had an email from Canada Post, and you could use those services. They let that fizzle. They did not develop it, that side of the business. And so they lost that. What about postal banking? In France, they have 20 million customers. In Italy, they make huge amount of money with Banco Posta. In Japan, trillions of yen in assets. You could have done that. They've missed the boat on that. If you wanted to run this like a business, well, there's money to be made in the postal banking system.
Carl's making it rain here, Sabrina. I'm going to give you the last word here. He's dropping yen and lira, and no, it's euros, actually. They don't have that anymore. Sabrina, just the last word to you. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Hey, Canadian steel. Let's get back to that Canadian. No, I'm kidding. Where do the Liberals go from here? How can they do this without looking like they are union busters?
Yeah, I think, when you ask about the future, like the question about these workers, I think the real question that the Liberals really need to ask themselves if we're thinking about this strategically is the future of work. And I think we've already talked about it here, how people are shifting away from Canada Post, whether that's online delivery. I mean, everything I get is emailed to me, whether that's Amazon or other, delivery services. What does the future of work look like? And I think that that's what the question when it comes to these jobs that in some ways are going to be outdated. When you look at the fact that you have like an unemployment crisis with youth, at the same time as we have some of these outdated jobs with unions, how is the Liberals actually going to solve that larger structural problem in the economy rather than just thinking about, how do we just deal with the Canada Post workers today? I think that's the question that they're trying to answer. And I think that's the question that's going to get them success in the long run and get Canadian success in the long run.